Every time a tragedy involving children, or not even involving children, right, is in the news, we always think about it at iVillage, that question of how do you talk to your kids about it? I don't know, my kids are pretty young still, so we're not necessarily having these conversations, but how do you talk to your kid about a tragedy?
I think it's really important to use empathy as much as possible. And obviously some things you just can't, you have to make good judgments. I mean, you can't throw everything out there. But when it does happen, like Jackson had found out like a family had lost their house, it burned down. So that really made him really uncomfortable. He was very anxious about it. So what we ended up doing is we ended up going through his closet. There was a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and finding as much stuff as possible. And then we were able to donate it. So we were able to sort of have him have a proactive part in it. And also to encourage as much as possible too, like, this happened, this is not gonna happen to you, you know, because I think it's easy for kids to get, who don't understand to begin with, have so much anxiety.
I think it's important that you talk about it. I think that some parents are like, well, they're so young, they're not gonna learn, and then they go to school and they hear about it from a classmate. And then you don't know what they're picking up, and then they start to get anxiety about it. So, we really do try to talk about it at a age appropriate level. But when the tragedy involves something that happens at school, like a school shooting, one of the big messages that our school district told us as parents that we should talk about with our kids is the issue of, if you see something or hear something, say something. Because in a lot of these situations, there were messages ahead of time. And if people had paid attention and told proper authorities, it could have been prevented. So, even my middle schooler, a little 6th grade guy, he needed to learn that you can't just ignore it. If someone says they're that upset, you need to take it seriously. You need to find a trusted teacher and tell them.
And it's really nice that you're doing that too, because you're empowering the kids. And I think as much as we can empower them and let them have some control over it too, I think can help too, so that their school will be different.
My daughter is, because she's really young, she doesn't really know a lot of stuff, but in her school they had, which for her was a tragedy, a little boy in her class kind of had a huge breakdown, and he took the fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed the entire room, and she talked about it for days, and it was just important for me, I could tell, to acknowledge how serious it was to her, and let her talk about it, and then, like Beth said, reassure her that, you're okay, mommy's here.
I think it's good to meet them on their level and try to explain it to them in a way that they'll understand, and then empower them to give them something that they can do or something they can learn about having a similar situation. So.
Yeah, I was recently at our school, and there was a presentation on how to talk to your kids about child sexual abuse, and such a not a tragic thing, but really informative. But 2 things that this woman said, based on what you guys were saying too, really. Number 1, talk calmly, right? Kids sense fear, they sense worry. So it's just a great reminder to me, even when you're gonna talk to kids, I guess, about tragic things, try to be calm and not, they can sense fear, right? They can smell it. But the other thing was sort of what you were saying, Brandi, about listening. Let the kids guide the conversation, let them ask you questions, right? I mean, it sounds commonsensical, but how often are we talking to our kids trying to answer the questions for them to make it all better? Let them. I just thought that was a little bit of a light bulb.
And know that it might happen over time. They may say one thing today and they'll be like, okay, I'm done. And then they might be thinking about it and it comes up again the next day. So just allow it to evolve as it needs to.
I think that's great.